You are my linen garment I put on. Lord, you are my linen garment I put on, while I minister to in the inner courts. They shall not gird themselves with anything that causes sweat. They shall not gird themselves with anything that causes sweat. Lord, you are my linen garment I put on. Lord, you are my linen garment I put on, while I minister to you in the inner courts. Oh, your garments smell of earth and aloe, of acacia. Oh, your garments smell of myrrh and aloe, of acacia, as I minister to you in the inner.
Well, hello. I gotta tell you something super exciting before I even go anywhere else. I found petrified wood. I have not found petrified wood except 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I found petrified wood. But it was like tiny little scrub pieces in the middle of like the waste bin of a landscaper's aisle at a TJ Maxx. It was like very not impressive pieces, like yay size. And I was definitely like, got the itch for petrified wood. If y'all don't know about petrified wood, excuse me for a second. If you don't know about petrified wood, it's outrageous testimony just sitting there staring at you in the face. You suddenly look down and you're like, that's a tree. Like that's a chunk of wood. You drive by or step on in the forest, you're like, oh yeah, piece of wood, whatever. But this one's turned to stone. It's so epic. Like this one literally looks like the branch, like splitting off of the trunk. Isn't that ridiculous? I love it so much. Like, I found so much petrified wood in Arizona now. It's ridiculous. I've been there throughout most of my life when I was growing up, young and full of piss and vinegar and fury and rage and absolute desire to just end the lives of all the monsters that I knew. It was a totally different season, kind of. And I was desperately praying for help and mercy and deliverance and hope. And I would find these tiny little treasures because in the northern-ish chunk of Arizona, it's not all a desert. Arizona gets a totally different reputation because most people picture Phoenix. Most people picture whatever the network marketing version of nightmares has come to you by the mass media about that area. And they're like, Arizona's a desert. Well, a lot of Arizona is still somewhat of a desert, but it's also got ridiculously beautiful forests. And I grew up in those, like in the White Mountains of Arizona. Shout out to you, Pinetop, Sholo, Lakeside survivors, lands of nightmares. Anyways, but they got these rad minerals. Because of mountains always expose that which is hidden inside the earth. Because it's literally like a grand revelation has just taken place when a mountain suddenly rises up out of the earth. I love mountains for that reason. And I used to really, really, really love finding petrified wood there. And they have literally a forest of it. And it's called the Petrified National Forest. It's a national forest, but it's just petrified trees. And those trees are particularly interesting. Let me get a piece of one. Hold on. All right. This was one of my first home improvement projects I ever did voluntarily. Okay. I have this slide that comes out of my house, my RV, when it transforms. And it used to have this accordion style wood that would come in and out to cover this gaping hole where my water lines and electrical for my fridge hook up. Well, that broke before I got it, okay? It wasn't my fault. Well, I needed to fill that gap. And the guy had, I don't even know, a piece of cardboard. He had just some kind of thing he shoved in there. Well, I built this as a perfect shape. It's like the shape of Oklahoma. Look at that. So I put Oklahoma in that gap so that way air doesn't constantly pour in there. And I don't hear the sound of everything that's happening under my storage base, which is not good because it's often mice. Freaking murderers. I can't stand them. I kill them regularly, 3 to 6 a week, not a joke, because they always want to live in my house. But on here, the state of Oklahoma, you can see petrified wood. That doesn't look like the other petrified wood, right? Here's some. Here's a chunk, right? It's very tree-like. See that? This is petrified wood as well, but it's like opalized. It literally is like an opal. And if you can't see that super well, what I'll try to do is roll in sweet, delicious pictures of it right now. But you can see it's literally like opal. It's beautiful. It's so amazing. And I use these for the handles so I can pull this out when I need to bring that slide in. You can grab that and pull it out. I love making jewels out of treasures I find and making them into handles and stuff like that. My house is literally covered with them. My wife was definitely a little intimidated when I first did that, full disclosure, because I used really permanent glue, like JB Weld level glue. And she's like, you're not going to cover that whole thing with those, right? And I was like, no, I have held to that. She asked me not to do any more on that one. So I didn't. I just covered everywhere that's at eye level instead. It was beautiful. She never saw it coming. But I use hot glue on those ones. So they're technically removable. They're never coming off of there, folks. It's not going to happen. They occasionally fall off and crack me directly in the skull face. And I pay for it severely. But petrified wood is a tremendous testimony because you know what's interesting about petrified wood? It also totally debunks the nonsense garbage lies that you've been given in the religion of science most of you were raised in. And there's this incredible thing that happens when people talk about the strata, like the layers that are in the earth that they think can tell you a timeline about cataclysmic events that took place in the earth's history, and that we can track the times of how long eons of things have occurred. I think that's happy screaming. Maybe not. I might have to deal with that. Anyways, those layers, people have used them as an indicator for time, which definitely is super beneficial in things like archaeological studies. And you're trying to date historical finds at their place of when they occurred in time. Problem is a bunch of people that were influenced by Hasatan, the adversary, to perpetuate a total deceitful thing that was very authoritative, historical, reliable text known as the scriptures. They wanted to totally phase that out of history and make people not believe that it could be trusted. And one of the tools that they used in that playbook of the arsenal for their weapons of mass destruction was the layers of geological history. And one of those most incredible evidences in your tool belt to just shoot that in the face. Let me just explain this to you. When you want to shoot something in the face, use proper weaponry. This is a weapon of mass destruction known as a 50 caliber bullet, okay? This is fired out of a 50 caliber rifle, oftentimes the M2, the Ma-Deuce. Without question, my favorite machine gun I have ever fired in my life. This literally comes on a sweet, incredible, listen to that. I would, if I could, wear this as a necklace. I know you've seen it in the videos and the movies and people are draping these over their shoulders because it just feels like excellent. It's just glorious to have an incredible strip of this hanging off of your neck. Now, this is shooting a bullet. This is the actual bullet that leaves the barrel, the projectile that leaves the barrel is like, no joke, it's like that big. This thing comes out like a football flying through the air at ridiculously fast speeds, and it can kill you dead, son, 5 miles away. Okay, technically most people are like 2. They'll say 2. But you can literally hit stuff and still cause harm 5 miles of thunderous, shocking devastation away. It's intense. You can cause massive harm to things very, very far away. Now, this has, with a machine gun, not like the movies, like the machine gunner's rule is to maintain fire discipline. And it's not easy because you get excited when you've got endless ammunition, in theory, and you have an incredible button that you push that makes just fire bolts come out of your barrel. So, discipline teaches you to shoot 3 to 5 round bursts. Tum, 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 tum. tum, 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 tum. There should be controlled bursts of ammunition when you use a machine gun. Often in the movies, it's just, we call that spray and pray. Sometimes you're using that for heavy suppressive fire when you just need somebody to shove their face into the earth so you can move other people on top of them and destroy them. This is used for that. Now, there's this special set apart Kadosh bullet right here. You see that one? How it's got that red tip? Okay, in the United States military and most militaries around the world, they cover the tips of the ammunition differently so that you know, hey, there's something Kadosh about this. This one's set apart. You even see it has a second little kind of crimp line right up here. This bullet is not like the others. It looks like it and it'll fly like it and do most everything else the other ones do, but this one burns with fire of the sun level intensity as it leaves the barrel, and it leaves a tracer, an arc through the sky, so you can actually maintain an idea, a visual reference to something off in the distance of that's where my bullets are actually going. Because even if you're aiming, like the Ma Deuce I shot didn't have all these fancy optics that some of them have now on the mounted turrets, and mine was a bare bones M82 machine gun, and it had iron sights. Well, you could adjust those and like help to dial in your targeting through basically things that rose it up and down, and kind of you could rotate it this way and you could elevate it, elevators maybe. Well, this was the thing that helped you know exactly where your bullets were going. So every time you see one of these, you got to know that there's at least a couple more around it every single time. You don't get one of these until 4 others have come out of that stinking thing. So this was the marker of devastation when it came to the arsenal that was in the United States military's incredible armory. I can't deny it. I love it. I miss that. That's definitely one of those, oh my gosh, if I could do that on a regular basis, I would. I'm way too frugal to shoot firearms. Like if I have to pay for the bullets, I just don't want to shoot them. I'm like, I can't do it, you know? But if other people pay for it, I'll shoot all the bullets, all of them, all the time. I love that feeling. Now, petrified wood is totally the Ma Deuce. Is totally the Ma Deuce when it comes to debunking garbage doctrines that you've inherited in the religion of science. Because there's these trees, you see, that are sticking vertical. Petrified wood, trees, sticking vertical through multiple layers that should be thousands and millions of years apart. One tree sitting there like a dude, just relentlessly staring in your face as he opposes your deception and lies. That's those trees. And you know what's so cool is we have a modern day version of how that happens, because these trees and some of these cataclysmic layers that we see in the geological record, they happen super fast, like in literal minutes. Some of this stuff can take place. You can have a Grand Canyon size event take place where the entire Grand Canyon is formed in stinking minutes, hours, and days. It's unbelievable. There's this cataclysm that we read about in the scriptures known as the flood, the Great Flood, where the entire earth was filled like a bathtub with water 40 feet above the highest mountain of the earth. Like bad news bears, major cataclysmic events, water raining out of the heavens. The windows of the heavens of the firmament are opening up and deluging everything. Fountains of the deep are breaking open from in the earth, shooting water so hard up into the sky that the moon is taking a pounding. You ever wonder why the moon looks like it's been beat the snot out of it and it's been shot 550,000 times with moon-sized bullets? This is the fountains of the deep sun wreaked havoc up there. Well, suddenly the mouths of the abyss, these giant cavernous openings into the depths of the earth, opened up and swallowed all the water again and created massive canyons as things drained out of it. Well, during some of those events, like at Mount St. Helens, which is a modern day version of something crazy insane that happened, there was a lake that was, full of unbelievable amounts of trees that just got wiped off the earth and broken off and sank down into this giant lake. And they're all just sitting there floating around on like tree rafts. Well, as they began to get waterlogged, the bottoms of some of those begin to get heavier than the tops and they float vertically in the water. Well, then all of that ash layer and all of those crazy millions of years of ash, all of that monumentous amounts of cataclysmic layering and sedimentation starts to take place. And those things are sticking like this, straight up through all of those layers as they take place. Petrified wood is your stinking bullet through the head of one of those. Just a tiny one of those. There's a whole bunch more, like dinosaurs have DNA. Like we can find living DNA tissue in dinosaur bones. Not Jurassic Park cool level DNA. Like Tyrannosaurus Rex DNA literally found, which doesn't last that long, folks. Anyways, there's a whole other thing. I got really heavy into apologetics for, probably 12 years of my life, and I just love that stuff. There's some incredible apologetics folks out there. Some of them also just are totally ravagely against a lot of other things that are totally based in scripture and the truth, and that's most unfortunate. But for what it's worth, I love finding treasures like that, because to me, these are living stones of testimony. And in the scriptures, it's very clear that the Father is all about these living stones of testimony. And that's the survivors. That's the humans that are the overcomers, that endure all the way until the end, and they get to receive the greatest inheritance that is greater than any eye can see, that any mind can imagine, that any ear has ever heard. There's a wondrous treasure that's in store, and it's not up in heaven. Like, there is not this fairy tale land of puffy clouds and naked baby angels floating around in the heavens that you're going to get to inherit someday. No, man, we get to inherit the earth. Like the real gospel, the true gospel, the gospel of the kingdom that Yeshua came and was like, the gospel of the kingdom. Like, when you really know what the gospel of the kingdom is, it's that we have a king who is going to reign supremely and sovereignly over all of the earth. Every single creature on this earth, every single thing that has ever been created was created for the glorification and for the wondering amazement, marvelousness of our Creator and His Son, and for His chosen people, His set-apart people who, by blood or by belief, choose to walk in His peculiar and strange ways and leave the clinging pride of life, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, to leave it behind and to sacrifice everything they have for the truth that they found, to sell everything they have to buy a single treasure, which is the truth. And it makes them totally different. And He wants to spend all of eternity with those people. So He said, I'm going to go prepare an epic home for you guys. Like the home of all homes, New Jerusalem. Some people think it looks like a cube. Reference this 10-ounce block of copper. Cube. It's like 1,200 miles across. Like gigantic. I just drove 1,200 miles in, I don't know, 13-ish hours the other day. And I did it again like 2 days later. That's tremendous distance. That's like that's country crossing distances in a lot of parts of the world. It's multiple states in our world. It's like half of the United States in a lot of it. It's a staggeringly massive place. And that's just one of these lines of it. And then it goes up too. And it goes up this way, this way. It could be a pyramid shape too, for all what it's worth. But He's preparing a kingdom there, and He's going to reign on the earth. Like, the earth is what gets to be the place of our inheritance, not the floating heavenly clouds, the earth. But the earth has got to go through another cataclysm, like a massive cataclysm, to where all the kings of the earth, all the rebels, all the people that really wanted to fight with Yahuwah, who deny Him, who want to mock Him and belittle Him and hate Him and pursue His people, like the people that follow the adversary, whether knowingly or subtly, He's deceived them into being subjects to Him. Like it says that people get beguiled by Him to do His will and are ensnared by the dragon to do his desires. But you know what's most interesting is the second time He comes back. It says that when He purges and cleanses the earth this next time, He does it not with water as the first, because He set a covenant with Noah that He would never do it again with water. And He gave us as a testimony of that, the rainbow, right? The true sign of the covenant is this bow in the sky. And really, if you look at it from higher up, it's a circle, you know? And there's this letter in Paleo Hebrew here. I'll roll in another picture, which is a circle with an X. The X is the sign of the covenant. It's the Tav, the last letter, final statement, the declaration of absolute. When you, X marks the spot on a treasure map, right? Same concept. When you sign your name, even today in legal documents, they put an X, the covenant. Put your covenant and your mark here. The tet is the circle of the bow with the covenant inside it, right? It is like a full basket of harvested fruit. Like everything is coming to its full culmination. Well, when He puts His sign on His people and His mark upon them, and He says, these are mine, the enemy's going to put his mark on His people, and they are going to obey His voice. And the people that obey Yahuwah's voice, they get marked as His people. And He delivers them from the final fires. But you know what's so fascinating about why He chooses to use fire? One of the small reasons I'm starting to study and learn about this has to do with what happens when things get burned. Check this out. My whole life story, I'm realizing more and more, is really captured in this right here behind me. Okay? Check this out. There's this thing out there which is really, really fascinating, called biochar. Now, if you don't study soil amendments and how to grow food and how to sustain human existence and animals' existence, this may never have crossed your mind. But for those of you that are, because I know you're awesome. There's some of you out there that are homesteading it and crushing it. There's some of you that want to and can't. There's some of you that are also trying to grow like a business, and you're trying to actually make money off of your land and trying to be able to make a means of income to sustain your family's livelihood. So I would encourage you, first of all, check out some of the resources that I'm going to put below on some of the people like Curtis Stone or J.M. Fortier. These are like Richard Perkins. These are some of the people that I look to try to engineer a design and implement, like with what I'm doing here on this farm, trying to engineer a way of providing means for my family or other families to not just eat high quality, nutrient dense, delicious produce and incredible animal products, but also to finance it, because I don't want to have to get stuck in working outside of this land. But that's a whole other longer topic. But a big piece of it is going to be putting amendments and nutrients back into our soils so that our soils can produce abundant, nutrient-dense food. Well, one of the best things that you can possibly ever give to your soils is this product called biochar. And you can make biochar at home. Reference the video below, which is fantastic. And you can see about how to make one with a 55-gallon drum or two in a 30-gallon drum, I think, stacked inside of it. Anyways, what it does is basically you take wood. I don't have more wood. Here's my strop. You take wood, and instead of just burning it to ash, right? If you just put this in a fire, hot fire, just burn down to ash. Ash has some uses, right? You can make soap out of it, which I use rarely. But you can use soap and make all kinds of lye and different things. It has its own awesome uses. Reference the other video that's below. But if you instead put that in a super hot burning environment, but it itself can't get hit with the flame, that the flame itself can't ignite it so that it's combusting, what happens instead is it chars. The gases that are in this, the volatile gases that are in this, can, as it's getting heated, they get boiled off, right? They get boiled off. Oftentimes we see this as smoke coming out of a fire. And as it's coming off, those are volatile gases. Those actually could get burned. Smoke is a sign of inefficiency in a fire, especially like darker black smokes or lots of heavy white smokes. Like dense smoke is a sign that you have an oxygen deprived fire. The fire needs three major components, right? You need your fuel, you need your heat, right? And you need oxygen. And when you're low on any one of those threes, you have different fruits, things that are evident, real, like noticeable. Well, when you have those volatile gases coming off of this because it's being heated, but not in a chamber with fire, this instead begins to dry out. It literally dries out and turns into charcoal for all intents and purposes. It becomes like charcoal. Well, what's super interesting about that product is that it now has these massive amounts of space inside. You literally create a home for billions and trillions and innumerable microbiology to live in. Like little tiny microbes like nematodes and tiny protozoa and bacteria and fungi and all these little tiny critters that live in the ground that you have to have in order for you to have anything to eat. In order for that to live, it needs to have a home to do it in. And char is amazing because it's just millions and millions and millions of square feet inside tiny little pieces of wood. And when the Father comes back and his Son comes back, he's going to scourge the earth and burn it with fire. And he's going to turn the earth into biochar. Like the whole top layer of the earth is going to get turned into biochar. I had this realization the other day as I was talking to Chelsea, and I'm like, he did it with water the first time. And when you think about the fountains of the deep are opening up and the waters of heaven are raining down upon us, like he's remineralizing the earth, because when you break up and crumble rock, one of the best amendments for soil is rock dust, just pulverized, smashed to dust rock. You can almost always find it as like a waste product at whatever nearby quarry is. There's always places that are getting road making materials wherever you live. And they have rock crushers there. And one of the tills or like the fines is the product that is like the waste product at the end of that line. And they take that product and they literally have nothing to do with it. So it just sits in mountainous heaps. They will give it to you. You can just load it up. The cost is only in transportation. But that's one of the best things you can ever put on your land in huge amounts too. Like reference the other video below. Rock dust is one of the best things. This is why the Fertile Crescent like of Egypt, is still one of the fertilest places on the earth. There's another area where the mountains of Ganges and Nepal and all of the Tibet, all of these mountains have glaciers eroding and scraping apart rocks and pulverizing them. Glacial gravel, like tiny glacial gravel. It's like the best stuff. It's like the earth just sucks it up and gets fertile and fertile and fertile like crazy. Well, that fertility comes from rock dust. And when the first flood happened, man, he remineralized the whole earth. He vomited out rock upon the whole earth in this superfine particulate matter. And he refertilized the earth that way. Because I think about this stuff all the time, you guys, because I'm constantly fighting the fact that soils are depleted, lands are exhausted. Like, we live in a creation that is literally screaming in agony. Like, when I drove through the deserts of the Southwest, I've lived there my whole life, but I just drove through that recently and was just astonished again because I've been drunk on green. I've been living out east for a lot of years now, and I've been drunk on it, man. There's so much green. You're just like, I love it. I hug trees because I didn't have hardwoods, man. I just had pine trees, like lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of pine trees my whole life. And I like pine trees, and I've hugged some. I've eaten their sap. I chew it as gum, but it's not the same as like a majestic oak. Like, there's nothing that compares to the majesty of a massive live oak, or a ridiculously glorious, incredible cherry tree or chestnut tree. Like, these things are just so powerful to me and just massive. I never saw that. Like, the biggest trees I had in Colorado were like cottonwoods. I like them, but they spit sappy garbage on you all the time, and they literally blow over in a bad windstorm like that fast. It's savage. So when I drive through like places like the Southwest, and I cry. I just like groan as I see just endless fields of desolation. Like, as you drive west, you guys, the trees just start to get smaller. It starts to get a little less green, and trees are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until there's no trees. And then when the trees stop, like, you get some shrubs. You get shrubs, and you're like, oh yeah, we still got shrubs. It's gonna be okay. Then the shrubs start getting smaller. And then the shrubs go away. And you're like, oh, but it's okay. There's some grass. There's grasses. There's still some life out there. And then the grass goes away. And then all your hope goes with it. And you just realize it's just desolation and nightmares as far as you can see. And you're like, wow. And then suddenly you see endless miles of artificially green GMO soy, wheat, cotton, and corn. And you weep even more, for the deserts of death are upon us. And you're just like, no. Like, how are you going to fix this? Like, how do you fix all this? Like, we have depleted. We just have there were places in the Missouri and Mississippi and the Ohio River valleys, you guys, where they measured 220 feet deep of topsoil. And I'm not talking about Home Depot topsoil bags. I'm talking about topsoil that was made by massive amounts of animals. Just tremendously huge animals, bisons by the tens of millions, herds that would run in front of you, just a single herd that would run in front of you for 3 days. For 3 days, it was running past your face. There were birds that were so numerous, they could blacken out the sky for days. Like, there's so much life and vitality in this land that was managed by humans, by the way, with good management. The native people that were here were managing more animal product on the pound, on the hoof, than all that we have today successfully. And one of their major tools in that arsenal, you guys, was fire. We now try to control and contain fires. And in the past, people used to manage fires on a regular basis, because in those grasslands where these bisons and these animals would move fast, they'd eat tons of stuff and they'd trample everything down and poop and pee everywhere and refertilize stuff. And then a predator would come along and they'd be like, fight for your lives. They'd hurry off. And the grass would be like, oh my gosh, that was horrible, but I'm so happy because they pooped and peed on me and they tore my head right off and now I need to regrow quickly. Then the land would just... fertility would increase, topsoil would grow tremendously. That's the kind of topsoil environment. And then what would happen is those people of unbelievable wisdom would come in there and they'd be like, you know what? Let's set fire to this whole thing. Burn it down, baby. And they would torch the grasslands, you guys. And as the grasslands would burn, they burned super hot and super fast. And all those tiny little shrubby trees and all those tiny medium-sized trees and the ones that are bigger, what's so cool, like things like the ash juniper or like cedar trees, right? They would get burned up because they're super, super combustible. I use cedar bark to just ignite anything. It just like burns like 1,000 degrees hotter than the surface of my face has ever experienced. It is so hot. I had a cedar fire the other day, you guys, that got almost completely out of control, like really bad. I had a tiny hose, and I realized the hose was not fully on after I started the fire. And I've never had a giant cedar fire, and it was just like, it was super sketchy, and I had to stop filming really quick because I was gonna die. Here's the wonders of a cedar fire. Watch this thing. Wow. Oh my heat. Whew. Ouch. Ow. Wow. Ouch. Oh. Oh my goodness. I suddenly had that absolute realization that I needed to attack this fire, any little hot spots that may pop up, rather than film and be giddy with glee at gigantic flames. I did great. There's very little wind today, but there was a big gust that came up as the fire was demanding it. But as you can see, it stayed relatively where it needed to. It's pretty good. Pretty good. That is a smoking hot fire. Fast and hot. Melt metal hot. Pretty great. Honey mesquite, which we also have a fair amount in there, will no joke melt your metal. You put that thing in your little chimney or cute little fireplace thing outside, it'll melt that sucker right on down. Oh, it's so fun. I love this life. It was dumb. I was on the edge of Stupidville, and I knew it right after it was almost too late. I took care of it, mercifully, with living water. But cedar burns like crazy fast. But there's other trees that are super resistant to fire, and they don't burn that much. But those hot, fast fires go quickly, and then you know what's interesting? They leave lots of char behind because they burn fast and they leave char, but they don't just keep burning it down to ash. So it would re-char the landscape and create these massive, beautiful colonies and homes. It was like a real estate deal of the ages, and all the microbes from that poop and pee and all of that trampled down green matter had all this new space to move into. And so this fertility would just build. And then people showed up that had a totally different management practice, and we slashed and burned stuff. And then we were like, we want cattle to have lots of grass, so cut all the trees down. No, cattle still need shade, doofus. We still need some trees, like badly. Trees support a totally different ecology that every single thing on the earth needs. Anyways, I'm having this realization as I've been studying biochar in all of these different civilizations, like the places down in the Amazon, where there really is one of the most nutrient-deprived soils on the face of the earth. Tons of stuff growing, but not in the soil. It's all up in the tree canopy. And the soil is just this unbelievably derelict, starved clay soil where it rains and it just sheets off instantly. But there's these people down there who are managing to build massive amounts of topsoil. And they were doing it by creating biochar. So there's some incredible information about that, you guys. And I'm realizing now that biochar, like if I go put compost on my soil bed, like if I'm making my new permanent raised bed, I'm going to put a couple inches of compost on top of it, like every single time. And compost might give me 2, 3, 4 years boost in fertility. Like, yay, stuff's so thankful. But as I use it up, it's like stinking, I'm not going to grow for you anymore. I'm miserable and depressed, and I have no amounts of cobalt and zinc and molybdenum. I'm exhausted of all of my phosphorus and sulfur. Help me for copper. That's how the plants talk. But if you give them biochar, it can last thousands of years. Like thousands of years. But it's like a gun that you got to load a bullet into. But if you just put biochar straight onto your soil, it's going to suck for the first year because literally it's sucking up all the life that exists in your plants and your soil and everything it can get its hands on. But the next year, you got a stinking loaded machine gun, son, and get out of the way because, you know, the Ma Deuce is on its way. That's biochar. And I'm having this realization. That's what the Father's going to do to fix this, to heal the earth, to like restore it. Like massive amounts of charcoal. You ever needed to detox immediately? No. I'm sure none of you have ever dabbled into something nefarious that made you have to puke your brains out in order to survive. Some of you are survivors, and I'm proud of you. But they give you lots of activated charcoal. You know why? Because it's got all of that space, that real estate to absorb the toxins that are in your body, which is why you should brush your teeth with it. Your teeth will be invigorated and so appreciative. Seriously, you'll feel like somebody just buffed you down at the dentist with something other than fluoride that causes stupid poisoning on your teeth. Stop using fluoride in anything. It's literally made for death. Just don't. On another note, when you take charcoal into your body, it helps to pull toxins out of your body and excrete them out of your poop and your pee. There I am talking about it again. It's just incredible for you. And this is a way that he can heal the oceans. Like there's a dead zone out the Gulf of Mexico. It's like where the Fertile Crescent is for Egypt and Mitzrayim, we have the death zone out of the Mississippi River Delta. Like the exact inverse. If you look, here's this incredible picture that I'm showing you. We have the exact inverse of life coming out of our country. Out of the excrement of our nation is death. Like that's what we export to the oceans. And like the Gulf of Mexico, oh my gosh, is desolate for 1,000. Like I think it's a similar size to this New Jerusalem, like a 1,200 mile stretch of just desolation. And so because of that, Louisiana and Texas and going down into Mexico, it's just this wasted oceans. And you know what that means? It changes the entire weather patterns for the rest of this entire continent. Like you have to understand, when our iniquities and our sins and our transgressions reach a certain threshold, the land vomits you out. Like the land itself literally vomits you out. Like 2 weeks ago, I went back into Colorado and I looked upon it. I drove the entire state and I looked upon it and realized that land is scarred. Like scarred, there's been burns upon all of it. There's drought and desolation. And I literally told Chelsea, that land is vomiting out its people. Like it's vomiting out its people. That's where I used to live. There was a fire there just recently that burned within a mile of where my wife and I used to live. And you know, that's where the first video on my channel that ever I uploaded was a documentary about the ridiculous level of radical intelligent evil that was taking place there. People that served the kingdom of darkness so committedly that they sacrificed human beings to Elohim, to gods. Like they literally massacred human beings to try to make a spiritual covenant secure with their God. Like they did that in our neighborhood. This is like national news, Jessica Ridgway. It was savage, unbelievable, radical intelligent evil. And the people that commit this stuff get away with it ongoingly because they've created a culture and a system that encourages them to practice wickedness and revel in it. And it's very much akin to Sodom and Gomorrah. But there was also all these people in the Canaan and the lands that were occupying that territory that was the inheritance of his people, of Yah's people, that were participating in similar activities. But it says over and over again, the land vomits us out. The land will vomit them out. And the land literally vomited them out. The Israelites weren't the only thing that fought the giants and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Amorites and the Hittites. The literal animals rose up and fought them out of there. It says that he raised up hornets to drive out those people that were living there. Literal swarms of hornets, like savage hornets, this big, gigantic, like hornets this big that will wreck your face no matter how big of a giant you are and how much awesome armor you have. You can't fight against bees. I've seen soldiers, guys, trained human murderers, guys that murdered dozens of people. Guys that shot and killed people, killed in close quarters combat, extreme, radical, devoted, murderous, rampaging, tyrannical men. Gibborim, for certain. I have seen them squeal like children and run like the wind from a single hornet. It says he sent hornets in their midst to drive them out of the land. Like that's what's happening in some of these places around us. And it's unbelievable because you know what? It doesn't have to be that way. It need not be that way. If we turn and we petition our Father for mercy, for forgiveness, he can cleanse us and wash us in the water of his word, and he can renew us and give us a new purpose. Like my wife and I, at the beginning of our ministry, that's the stuff we used to talk about. Like that was the beginning years, first year really, of our ministry was talking about all that stuff. Like I have hundreds of hours of videos that I filmed documenting all of this evil that was taking place in Boulder County and all around Denver County, like all over that place, Broomfield. And I mean, all these places where it's just super saturated with evil that's been taking place in that area. And I have all this footage of this just horrific satanic rituals that are taking place there, under bridges, all of the like cursings that people write on the bridges. Like literally the satanic covens have adopted the highway. Not even joking, you guys. That road, which is by the National Renewable Energy Lab, their wind turbine section, that road was adopted. You just sit there and you drive by the adopt a road sign, and you're like, the Church of Satan's right. Where do we live? That's the world we live in right now, you guys. But you know what? We begged the Father to get us out of there for years and years and years and years. And we're like, we don't want out. And he's like, no. We're like, please, 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 please. He's like, no. I had to live in a neighborhood of murderers, like documented murderers were my neighbors. And you're like, you know, it was a ridiculous place to live. But you know what? The Father's timing was perfect as to when he got us out of there. And I'm just so thankful for it. But you know what? I have totally different sets of challenges and obstacles that I have to now endure that I couldn't even comprehend it back then. Like, I'm building tables now. Tables for plants.
Well, there you have it. My first bed. Actually, second bed. I made one out of bamboo and old plywood that I found on the backside of a farm for Naomi. This is now my second bed. This one's definitely a lot better, but different because bamboo's round. It's nice working with squared timber sometimes. But I think it'll work perfect. Now I'm going to go get some hardware cloth, put on the top of it. Whoosh, I'll have one done. A couple more to go. Took me about 4 hours. It's not too bad.
Houses for dogs. Houses for plants. Like, I'm building on a totally different level. When I had to build this one thing, man, this took me freaking all day long. And I was crying frustrated because I didn't even have a clue on how to do it. I didn't even know what I didn't know. I didn't know anything about building. Because when I first went on the road, I took one toolbox, tiny little toolbox with like only the mandatory tools that I looked up on a website. And I said, what do you need for full-time RVing tools? I put those in there. It was like a screwdriver that could ratchet. I used them all. I used all of them. I had a 2-pound sledgehammer that I still use all the time. I love that thing. But now I have a totally different mindset because I know what to do with tools. And I have this other insatiable desire to build and grow and cultivate and improve my life and the lands that I may be sojourning upon, because that's what I do. I went and learned trades and skill sets. And you know what? One of the greatest things that I found and I learned along that way was treasure hunting.
Oh my gosh. Whoa, whoa.
This is how I feel when I get to the beach. Yes! Beach, ocean, pelicans, waves, sunrise.
Oh,
Sunrise. There's not even that many waves. We are in for it today. It's gonna be so good. I can't even describe to you the elation in my soul, but feel it.
in my face.
Woo! It's all the way down into my toes because I can feel it. It's exciting. You know why? I'm going scuba diving at the beach today. Yes! Ultimate awesome ever. I can see the moon. I can even see the blue through the moon, which is peculiar.
What does that mean?
Quandary to you. Anyways, I'm going in the water. I'm gonna take a GoPro so you can see what I see. Yes! Woo!
Wow.
This is all number ones.
All number one.
We can see another Janonia piece, Chell. You gotta get your Janonia on. There's so many lettered olives, and then all of a sudden you'll get banded tulip sections, lightning well sections, banded tulip well sections.
That one. I don't think I've ever seen one with like real zigzags.
Look at
like
him,
that.
just, oh.
You need to eat a sandwich.
Oh, I haven't eaten since I was dancing at dawn. Look at this one, Chell.
Oh, he's so pretty.
Pristine. Janonia. Janonia!
And because of my treasure hunting, I'm able to send out incredible stones of testimony to people all over this world. And I love having an outlet for that. I love that each and every one of you guys that have encouraged us and supported us along this way, that now I have an opportunity to try to give something back to you guys. And you know what? These are the treasures that I found on that journey along the way. And I want you guys to find them too. So with that, That was a fairly decent introduction to Deuteronomy chapter 2, because I'm going to continue in the War of the Words. And this is the time for the War of the Words, right? If you didn't know about the radical, intelligent war of evil that's going on all around us, you need to read your scriptures, because this historical text will tell you everything about what's going down and how you can be strategically placed to overcome it, because that's about what has happened. Gibborim is the time of the testimonies, and then it's the time of the conquerings, and it's the time of total desolation and failure and screw-ups and miserable, oh my gosh, we're screwed moments. So let's jump in, shall we? Gibborim chapter 2. Then we turned and departed into the wilderness, the way of the sea of reeds, as Yahuwah spoke to me, and we went around Mount Seir many days. And Yahuwah spoke to me, saying, "You have gone around this mountain long enough. Turn northward." Okay, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. You're going around the same thing over and over and over again. Reference video 1 if you haven't. I talked about Groundhog Days and when you're trapped in the same rat race over and over and over again. Okay, that's, if Yahuwah has you in a place where you're doing that every day, you got to give into the season. It's a season that he's going to do it, and you pass the test. Just ask the Father every day, help me to pass the test today, because he tests us. Deuteronomy 8:2, we're going to get there. Most foundational verse of your whole life. Yahuwah tests us. He led them into the wilderness to test them, to see what was in them, whether or not they wanted to keep the commandments of Yahuwah. Okay? He wants to know what's in your heart. Your good dads test their children to see whether they're ready. Naomi has a knife now. You know what I mean? Like, I'm testing her. But I've been testing her since she was a year. My wife was not comfortable with it, but I first gave her a knife when she was just old enough to hold something. I'm like, let's see how she does. Let's see how she holds it. Let's see. I do it with Jubilee already too. I'm like, you cut these onions, honey. I'll give you a somewhat sharp butter knife. I'll sharpen it more if you do well. And she's doing great. Like, you got to give your children opportunities to be trusted with more, you know, because you want them so badly to be able to contribute. You want them to contribute. You families that have multiple children, I'm so exhausted and depleted with just 2, like just tag teaming me, just savage. They're incredible, but they're ridiculously hard to live with. You know what I mean? You know what I mean, parents. Delirious parents know exactly what I'm talking about. I work all day. I'll work all day. Sun's up, gone. Sun's coming down. I gotta go home, stumbling in like, oh, I'm so tired. Well, I'm back down in the beds. We're working on this asparagus planting down here behind me. We've had this one tarped off for a while. Yesterday I came in here and worked the rototiller from our tractor. Now, it's our first year on this farm, so we have a lot of preparation work because we're planning to do what are called permanent raised beds, meaning we're going to form and shape our beds and our rows, and then we're only going to ever add to them. We're not going to deep till them like I'm doing right here. And right now we have, because of the type of soil, incredibly compacted, hard, clay-rich soil. So I took the tractor rototiller and tilled these up yesterday. I then broke it, kind of. It was probably my fault. Bolts came off of it. Gearboxes were smoking. Plastic was melting. It was crazy. The people with the tractor place were like, "We've never seen anything like this before in our lives." Fantastic. Thankfully, they got it fixed the next day, free of charge. They were like, nobody used the crush washers. So maybe it's their fault. Most likely still mine. Rookie mistakes. Anyways, so I went back in today and deep tilled it again a little bit more. And by deep tilling, I mean I can get like 2 or 3 inches every pass because this is so hard. But now I've got more raised up dirt because of that rotary plow. And I came in here and I got these little trenches, and that's actually where I'm planting the asparagus, opposite of most plantings, which is right here in the raised portion of the bed. Here we're doing trench planting because you're going to actually bury the asparagus as it gets taller. As I do it now, this row, I hit this thing like 8 times, more than 8 times, 10 times with the rototiller, and it's still, the soil's just not having it. So it is what it is. But now I've got my second best tool on the face of the earth to work with. Alpaca poop. Yes. Little nuggets of glory. Alpaca poop. Alpaca poop and rabbit poop are like the 2 best things on the face of the earth when it comes to planting directly into them. You can literally put them in the earth
and plant directly into them and make your plants rejoice. Alpacas are savagely cool animals, and their wool is even better than cashmere. And cashmere is like the ultimate of ultimate wools. I love cashmere. I don't need it very often because I live in the places where it's hot as the surface of the sun sometimes. But today, I'm gonna get this one mulched in with some delicious, nutritious alpaca poop. I feel a lot better about it today. I felt like I was an ignorant idiot yesterday running around with no idea what I was doing, which is basically how it is a lot of the time. Today I feel better because I've done it a dozen times. Sometimes that's all it takes. But this bed's gonna look good when it's completely bushed over with a forest of asparagus for the next 25, 30 years. God willing. Live dangerously. Plant asparagus.
I'm so tired. Like, I work manual labor job, and I'm like exhausted when I walk in the door, and it's like, on, baby. You got 3 more hours of work to go, son. Like, double dip. It's relentless. It's so relentless. My wife works even harder than I do. I'm like, I couldn't even do it. I can't do one whole day. I couldn't do an 18-hour day with them children very well. It's not going to look pretty at the end of that day. You know what I mean? I'm not going to do well. It's hard being a parent. It's really hard trying to build life for a family. Like, I'm trying to build in such a way so I can leave an inheritance to my children's children. Like, that is my ultimate dream. I'm trying to leave them an eternal inheritance. So I'm trying to build in a different kingdom way. You know, I told my wife today, like, we give these treasures away because I know I want to store up treasure in a place that cannot be destroyed. Like, we have friends and family who lost everything in those fires recently. Everything they had except their lives. Like, that's how fast everything can get taken from us. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. When fire comes like that, man, it is inescapable. And riches can't protect you. Wealth can't protect you in that day. Poverty can't protect you, man. Judgment and fire and wrath spares nothing. And I want to store up treasures in a place that cannot be contaminated, cannot be thieved upon and broken into. We are trying to teach our children to live generously, to give generously, to work hard, and to work authentically. Like, to be willing to sacrifice your life for the lives of others. Because our Father surely rewards those who do his work. And he wants to reward his children here, but he has been testing them by having them walk around this mountain over and over and over again. And it's a really particular mountain here, Mount Seir. And Yahuwah spoke to me saying, in verse 4, and command the people, saying, you are about to pass over into the border of your brothers, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir, and they are afraid of you. So be on your guard, and do not strive with them, for I do not give you any of their land. No, not so much as 1 footstep, because I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession. What food you buy from them with silver, you shall eat. And also what water you buy from them with silver, you shall drink. For Yahuwah your Elohim has blessed you in all the work of your hand. He has known your wandering through this great wilderness. These 40 years, Yahuwah your Elohim has been with you. You have not lacked any matter. And when we passed over beyond our brothers, the descendants of Esau who dwell in Seir, away from the way of the desert plain, away from Elath, Itzon, Gibborim, we turn and pass over by the way of the wilderness of Moab. I just got to go back to that. It said, these 40 years, Yahuwah your Elohim has been with you, and you have not lacked any matter. Even while they were in that place, man, I got to say it. There's times on this sojourning journey, I felt like I could not say that. Like, I didn't. I didn't even want to say it, but I said it. There's times I said it where I felt like I lacked. Like, I felt like that was not the truth. I believe that when we went into the wilderness, I have a chapter in my book where it's called Into the Wilderness. And I'm like, we're going into the wilderness, baby. We're going to leave behind all of what we used to know. And I'm like, you can do it, guys. Be brave. Go into that wilderness. You know what? Wilderness freaking sucks sometimes. A lot of times. A lot of it can really suck. Like, really be brutal. Like, stretch you out and test you out and make you so incredibly uncomfortable and make you live in places you don't want to. Doing things you don't want to. Like, just unbelievably stretched thin. Like, I think this is why it says you're supposed to, like, if you're ever rich, you're supposed to remember and think often of your poverty. It says if you ever have plenty, you should often think about your days of lack and hunger. And I think we're supposed to go through these experiences of all these ends of the pendulum so that when we go through the other season, We don't always look to the next one for the next something better. Because even just a year ago, my wife and I were working 8 hours. Like my wife included in that. Volunteering. Let me just put it that way. Volunteering.
Hi! Strawberries! You are quite decorated here.
It's my last day.
Last day. Hey!
The vine dressing is complete.
Are you coming out to do strawberries?
No.
Oh, okay. Carrot! Let the carrot washing begin! If you need to wash this carrot, yes.
Oh, dude, let's go out. She's like, Tom.
Let's go in. Volunteering to have food because we couldn't go to Costco anymore. Like Costco was like, you're gonna have to put on a little mask of submission if you want to come in here and buy our groceries here. And I was like, what the heck are you guys talking about? And they're like, you cannot come in here if you don't do it. And I was like, you got it. So we couldn't go in there. And we're like, how are we gonna get groceries? Like, how do we get to Costco? We need Costco. I don't want to need Costco, you guys, but I need Costco. And so we were stuck with this dilemma. But there's people at the farm who would buy groceries for us. Like, they're like, we'll go to Costco. Like, I'll go to Costco. And I was like, all right, you want to go to Costco? What do I got to do? And they're like, you just got to work another 8 hours a day. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So that's what I did. It's like exactly a year ago. We had nothing but some things. Sorry. We had very little. And like, I was working so much harder, double days.
I'm going to share a little perspective from Tomato House, day 2. Today's job, as you can see, was prodigious. Now, what we've done is we have trimmed off all said lower leaves because these tomatoes, and they're beautiful looking fruit here, are all about to get dropped. We're gonna take these and push them over and all the tomatoes will push down this way. So we'll start at that end. We'll bring it all the way forward, going this way. And that way, it'll bring each of these will come down, boom. Coming down, maybe 12 inches, 18 inches, depending on each one as you go along. Really, really cool. But this is all the prep work ahead of time, is clear all this out now. It's gonna look good in here. And then we do it again like every week, over and over again.
So that we could have enough so that people that went to Costco paid for everything. You know, that was like the trade. And it was like, it worked, but it was brutal. I was so exhausted for totally different reasons. Like, I'm super exhausted now for totally different reasons. But my wife and I were having to sit here and think about it. And like, we had such little financially. We were devastated and debunked. Like, when your overdraft account pulls out and you're like, you're getting charged $35 a day. And you're like, I don't have any more money. And they're like, we're taking $35 a day of what you don't have. And you're like, I don't know how to get out of this. Like, we were having those moments in our life. And we were like, I don't know what we're going to do. Just keep praying super hard, honey. It was like that for a long time last year. And we were like, I don't know how we're getting out of this, but we're going to persevere. That's where we were. Like, and I was remembering that. My wife and I are remembering that today. And I'm like, I've got food. Like, just remembering these times and these seasons when you're in the wilderness and the trials. Like, I can't even tell you how many days that we were traveling and sojourning that we did not, literally, we woke up and would no idea where we were going to sleep that night. None.
They're so tasty. They go behind mom.
Are you actually crawling now? Are you crawling like a big girl through the clovers? Hi, Nate.
Come over here. Crawl over here and see.
There's Beth, our champion. There's Nathan, our champion bus driver. And we are behind a Cracker Barrel, and it is wonderful, and it is so peaceful.
I'm so happier right now. I'm not even joking.
And listen to those birds.
I've got birds and automotive noise, and yet I am at peace.
It's perfect.
Welcome to
None.
the power.
Zero. No idea where I was going to get water. I had 3 days in a row when I was in North Carolina. I was living in an Asheville, North Carolina, in a parking lot for 3 days. That way it turned into 7 and turned into 10. And I could not get water. I literally couldn't get water for days. Like I ran out of water. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot get water. Stores are all closed. Gas stations are closed. I was like, I can't get water. You know what I'm doing? I'm like going on the back sides of buildings and I'm trying to pick the locks where they have these water spigots and they have them all sealed up. I'm like trying to pick locks to get water for my family. I'm like, this is my sojourning. This is my days of lack. Like, I'm totally the grumbling Israelite at times, you guys. I can't even kind of deny it. I am not always like the man of faith and courage. And I know sometimes I've got all this piss and vinegar and fire and excitement to talk to you all, but there's some times where I super doubt. I doubt hard, and I get super discouraged and super depressed and frustrated and anxious and fearful and not sure of what I'm going to do. Like, I'm a human. I am not. Don't make me anything other than what I am, you guys, in your mind. Don't make me your hero, your champion. Don't make any man an idol. We're freaking terrible at it. We'll totally let you down and crush your hopes and dreams. Like, I'm just a dude. I put on my pants and I freaking go pee outside. Like, I'm a dude. There's nothing that special about me. My wife and I are human beings. We have incredible joys and uplifting moments and unbelievable devastations. Like, I buried 2 of my children this year. Like, we've lost 2 children this year. Unbelievable, horrible sufferings my wife and I have endured this year, at the same time as some of the greatest joys of our entire lives, simultaneous. And you know what? That's our life. That's our experiences. And that's what we have to share. And like, we hope you guys know this. We love you guys. And we want you to know nothing about what we do in our life is not something that you can't have a similar experience of when it comes to finding great joy and enthusiasm and treasures and life and an experience of hope that makes it all worth it in the end. Like, the Father eventually did help me to find a truck stop that had water in it. You know, 2 days later, I had kidney stones for 3 days and was peeing blood and incapacitated, laying on the ground. That's why I stayed longer at that Dick's parking lot, because I physically couldn't move. And I'm just dreading that a cop is going to come and knock on the door and tell me I have to leave. And I crying on the ground in the fetal position. Like, that was a year ago. You know, that was a year and a half ago. You know, like, these are the experiences that you have in life, and sometimes that's your season. And that's where the Israelites are right now. And the whole book of Deuteronomy, you guys, is trying to help them to remember that. Like, this book is supposed to be impressed upon our hearts. This is what Yeshua quotes twice when he has a personal battle with Hasatan, the dragon. When he personally fights him, he quotes from this weapon of mass destruction multiple times, because this is supposed to be impressed upon our children every day of their lives. These are the words that should be on our minds, so we do not forget. Like, we can't forget these moments and these experiences, because you know what? Your life can change so fast in a moment. Like, not knowing where you're going to sleep, not knowing where you're going to eat. Many of you do not have that feeling on your mind. Many of you do not even consider what it's like to not have running water or electricity, but some of you do. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about, where you're just trying to find a way for everything in your house not to freeze completely solid, where you don't want mold growing on all of your windows from the condensation. Like, there are trials and tribulations that are unique to each and every one of us. And at the same time, they're shared by many. And that's what the book of Deuteronomy is here to tell you, to encourage you, to strengthen you. Because even though we experienced lack in many things over these last few years, there's always been provisions of different things. There's been provisions of other things. Like, my children, they were healthy when I was peeing blood and incapacitated in pain. Like, my children were healthy then. My wife was strengthened. Like, there was different trades of good and blessings that were coming through that. He ended up soon after that revealing to us the things about linen. And he's given us garments that are so helpful to me. Like, they've helped me so much, you guys. I know it seems strange to some of you if you're first time just checking into many of this stuff, like why we're so enthused about natural fibers, because you can't even imagine the constant pain and like burning rage that is in me. Like, some of you have insatiable energy just inside you, like a furious fire inside you. I do. And like, it is never quenched, man. Like, I read today, my wife and I are reading through parallel the whole scriptures, like Genesis and Jasher and Jubilees simultaneously, of what events are taking place. And you get so much more depth about the story of Abraham that you need in the book of Jasher and Jubilees. And it just brings Abraham to life and humanness. You get to see his humanness and his faithfulness in such a richer way. And I love it so much. And it said Abraham at one point, he lives out on the run because people try to murder him when he's young too. He lives in a cave for the first 10 years of his life. And then the next 40 years of his life, he lives with Noah and with Shem, his son. And he learns the ways and the instructions and the statutes and the commandments of Yahuwah. At his 49th year of life, he comes home to his dad, Terah. Terah is literally the commander of the hosts of Nimrod's magicians, sorcerers. His dad is the master occultist of the nation. Like, you guys think of chief bad guys that you want to put on your, I'll totally kill all these bad guys if I could, lists. Terah, Abraham's dad, would be like way up on your list. And that's Abraham's dad. Like, he comes home and his dad is an idol maker, like for certain. And he's like, he's got an entire temple dedicated to all his Elohim. He has 12 of them in particular that he does sacrifices and honorings to each month of the year. Okay. And Abraham goes in there and he's like, this is an abomination. He's all ticked off, man. And he's like, you know what? For 3 days, I'm going to test these Elohim. Why don't I read it to you, man? It's so good. You guys don't know these stories. You stinking need to read them. You can find these books online for free. I don't prefer people to use digital methods if they can help it. But these books are so helpful. Like, I don't like many aspects of the Et Sefer. Like, they chose to use like an old English translation that just makes me want to throw my head through a vice. It's so frustrating to read the kind of translation. Like, it's not normal human words anymore. I cannot comprehend what they're saying. I literally have to sit there and look up what that word even means. It makes it very difficult to read this. So it's not an easy to read translation. But they included scriptures that had been scriptures, just not in the modern American Bible. Like, the modern American Bible that most of us have grown up with has 66 books. But the modern American Bible to the people in the 1800s had more than 80 books. Like, the 1611 King James had, I think, 82 books. Like, there's different nations all over the earth had different quantities of scriptures in their scriptures. And these books are incredibly helpful for understanding humans. Check this out, man. And in the 50th year of the life of Avram, the son of Terach, this is Jasher chapter 11. I'm going to jump in here on verse 13. And in the 50th year of the life of Avram, the son of Terach, Avram came forth from the house of Noach and went to his father's house. And Avram knew Yahuwah. That means he was in a relationship with Yahuwah. And he went in his ways and in his instructions. And Yahuwah Elohayu, his Elohim, was with him. And Terach, his father, was in those days still captain of the host of King Nimrod. And he still followed strange Elohim. The word there in Hebrew is Elohim Achrim, like strange outsiders, like the dangerous foreigners kind of concept in your mind, like the ethereal, exotic gods. Does that make sense? This is who he served. And Avram came to his father's house and saw 12 Elohim standing there in their temples. And the anger of Avram was kindled when he saw these images in his father's house. And Avram says, as Yahuwah lives, these images shall not remain in my father's house. So shall Yahuwah, who created me, do unto me if in 3 days' time I do not break them all. And Avram went from them, and his anger burned within him. Like, I finally think I understand why I'm so hot all the time. Like, that's why I'm hot all the time. Because I saw behind the veil of my father's house, and I saw behind the Reynolds curtain of their wealth and their empire. And I saw the idolatry and the abominations and the things they do in secret. Like, I saw that and I witnessed that and I was saturated in it for so many years of my life that it just created a cauldron of anger that was burning in me. And I'll be honest with you guys, is still just burning. I have so much anger. And I have petitioned the Father to free me from that. And honestly, one of the great blessings that I had last year and why I was so able to persevere was because every day I was immersing myself in water, in spring water, every day.
Oh, man. Good job,
No chance.
All right, Nene! Naomi, it's your turn!
Like, I haven't been able to do that as much. Like, I don't currently live somewhere that has, you know, a spring-fed creek on it. That's when you're in something like that, you guys, immerse yourself in it every stinking day. I don't care how cold or how hot it is, just get in the water. It is such a gift to have that. And it would just tune that down on me. And like wearing that linen, just putting linen on my flesh is the only fabric I have ever worn besides hemp that doesn't make me feel like I'm on fire. Like I feel like I am on fire, you guys, almost all the time. It never goes away, which is why it's incredibly hard for me to work in the heat. Like it just, because I just want to get enraged instantly. I just want to burn the house down. Like that's what Abraham has. He has that desire, and that's not wrong. Like Yeshua had that. He had that hot-headedness for a moment in his life, in his humanness. Yeshua had that in his Father's house. When he went into his Father's house, he saw that other people, like Terah, had invaded his house with strange Elohim. And the Elohim was Mammon. These people that were stealing from the people and extortioning. They were extortionists. They were basically bribing and blackmailing people into compliance and to give them what they wanted. It infuriated him so much that he made his own weapon of mass destruction. He braided a stinking whip, you guys. Oh, so savage. He braided a whip, which means he totally was a braider. Never considered that. Anybody ever picture Yeshua sitting down and braiding a weapon? Freaking beautiful. Make that painting. If you're an artist or wood carver or wood burner or painter, make that painting. Yeshua making weaponry. Freaking beautiful. Anyways, he makes a weapon of mass destruction, and he stinking drives those people out of his Father's house. His anger's burning, stinking. He's going to burn the house down. You know what I mean? I understand that feeling. Like, I had lists and lists and thousands of human beings on those lists, you guys. I thought I would hunt the nations of this earth and scourge the evil. I thought that's all I was going to do the rest of my life. Like, that's all I felt like I was ever made to do. Like, I'd been seeing behind the veil of darkness so that I could have that insatiable depth of rage to just go and burn the houses of these murderers down. That's all I thought I was going to do with my life. I never thought I was going to have a family and children, and this reality is still strange to me. I had to sit down the other night after working on the farm, like butchering animals, beautiful, which is super fun and satisfying. And I used this neck knife. Thank you again, Yehuda, you mighty man of valor. Empty knives. Followers of Yah making knives. Thank you. I use this knife to help to do my cuts, artisanal cuts on that sheep. And I came in and I was bloody and I was all frenzied because I've been all carving up meat all day. And I was like, that was amazing. I feel so satisfied. I feel like a man, red zone. And my children, I was like, I want to just not be around them because I'm frenzied and smoldering, like smoke coming off of my head. And my daughters are like, Dad, Mom made us a fort. Will you come play? And I'm like, yes, I'll meet you over there. And I was like, I don't want to go in there. I don't want to go in there. I don't want to sit down. I don't want to sit down. I don't want to sit down and play tea time. I don't want to do it. I don't. I will. Yes, I'll meet you over there. And so I sit down in there, and they've Chelsea's made some kind of fortress out of linen, curtainish kind of things, and it's beautiful if you're 3. It's super tiny if you're me, And they're like, Naomi's taking my order, and she's cooking up all this food, and she's getting little waters and drinks, and then she lays down a little tiny mattress bed that's big enough for 1/3 of my body to lay on. She's like, lay down, relax, take your time, settle in. I was like, okay. And then they wanted me to sit down and play, eat time with them, and they're talking to me about all kinds of stuff, and I literally have no idea what they're saying. I'm like, I can't even think right now. I'm still thinking about butchering that sheep. I'm still thinking about this whole other world that I live in and this other life that I live. I'm like, I don't have any relation and connection to that side of humanness. I know it's there for me to experience it and to enjoy it. I just the side of my soul that is childish and playful spends no time in the world of savage manual labor work. It just doesn't. It doesn't get to express itself there. I have no idea how to jump into that when I'm still so burning with rage all the time and I'm so on fire all the time. I can't just be joyful. You watch me when I'm treasure hunting though, and I'm getting wet and I'm finding incredible things like petrified wood, freaking childness of glory coming out of my soul, and I'm exuding it.
He smells terrible! Without question, one of the biggest horseshoe crabs I've ever found! He's amazing! The smell is just rancid! He's decomposing on the inside! But goodness gracious, look at that armor! Don't you want armor like that? I do. Did you know you have armor that's way better than this horseshoe crab? Read the Bible. It's full of armor. You ever hear about an armor bearer? Yeah, that's Yahuwah. He literally created armor for each and every one of you. That's way better than this horseshoe crab. It's armor of immortality. Check out Psalm 91 and Ephesians 6. Exactly, Naomi. Well, I hope you guys are living dangerously. Put on your armor.
I love treasure hunting, and I'm so thankful my father loves me enough to give me the opportunity to still go do that. And he gets me places, and he'll put me places where I can do that. And I'm so thankful for it. But sitting down and playing with my children like that is really hard. It's really hard. He gave me 2 daughters. Totally different world. I had 2 sisters, you know? I'm sure I played like this when I was their age. They were my age. I'm sure this happened in my past. I literally cannot remember it though, because there's just the fire there in its place. There's just the hot-headed, burning, furious. There's injustices that have taken place that are not rectified. Like, I've not been vindicated. Do you know what I mean? Like, my family and my friends who suffered have not been vindicated. These people and perpetrators who do this evil have not been judged. They've not suffered their day of vengeance. Do you know what I mean? And I wanted back then to be that man, to bring that. I don't now. I don't want to be the personal executioner to these people. I want to see it when it takes place. Let me not even kind of kid you. I want to be present when it occurs. I want to be a participant in the King of Kings desecration to the abominable things that have taken place. I want to witness it, but I don't want to be the executioner of it. Does that make sense? Because I see this other life, and now I desire that eternal city. I want to live in my Father's house. Like, I want to have an inheritance that he gives me that's not covered with blood-stained dollar bills and gold pieces. I want one that's pure, that's been purified, like silver refined in the fire 7 times. I feel like my whole life has been living inside a fire, so that all the impurities of generations, like I'm burning with the generations of impurities, because for thousands of years my family chose the path of darkness, and all those impurities are contained in my soul and my body. And so I just burn so that there might yet be a worthy prize at the end of that family's line, that my daughters might experience innocence where I had none, you know? Sorry, little emotional tirade there. But I think Abraham suddenly had an understanding of that. And I think there's a lot of people that have an understanding of that, and people that are experiencing that radical, intelligent evil coming in and harming their families and their friends and causing pain and suffering and death in the people around them. And you guys are going to start to experience that burning fire, and you're going to need to quench it. And I'm telling you, the only place that truly can quench it is the water of this word. And it is the Father living in us. And it's the power of his Spirit, his Ruach, living inside us to give us the strength to persevere and to overcome, so that we can eventually receive that great kingdom that's been promised to us, that we can rule and reign with our King forever, where there's none of that, where there's no more suffering, where there's no more sorrow, where we can have joy, rivers of living water. Oh, what a day that will be. I got to tell you how Abram, though, personally handled that evil that took place. Okay. Verse 18. And Avram went from them, and his anger burned within him. And Avram hastened and went from the chamber to his father's outer court. And he found his father sitting in the court, and all his servants with him. And Avram came and sat before him. And Avram asked his father, saying, Father, tell me, where is Elohim, who created heaven and earth? and all the sons of men upon the earth, and who created you and me? And Terach answered his son Avram and said, Behold, those who created us are all in this house. And Avram said to his father, My lord, show me then, to me I pray you. And Terach brought Avram into the chamber of the inner court. And Avram saw, and behold, the whole room was full of Elohim, of wood and stone, 12 great images. Images is another word for idols. And others less than they, without number. And Terach said to his son, Behold, these are they which made all that you see upon the earth, which created me and you, and all mankind. And Terach bowed down to his Elohim, and he then went away from them. And Avram his son went away from him. And when Avram had gone from them, he went to his mother and sat before her. And he said to his mother, Behold, my father has shown me those who made heaven and earth, and all the sons of men. Now, therefore, hasten and fetch me a kid from the flock. A kid is the proper word to describe a goat, a baby goat, not a human being, a young human being. That's a child. A kid is a flock. Naomi was really confused at this today because they're about to kill this kid and they're going to try to serve. And Naomi was like, what? I was like, honey, that's why we call you children, not kids. Kids are baby goats. Children are human beings that are young. Important differentiation in your language and what you speak over people all the time, just for what it's worth. Now, therefore, hasten and fetch a kid from the flock and make of it savory meat, that I may bring it to my father's Elohim as an offering for them to eat. Perhaps I may thereby become acceptable to them. And his mother did so. And she fetched a kid and made savory meat thereof and brought it to Avram. And Avram took the savory meat from his mother and brought it before his father's Elohim. And he drew near to them that they might eat it. And Terach, his father, did not know. And Avram saw on the day when he was sitting amongst them that they had no voice, no hearing, no motion, and not one of them could stretch forth his hand to eat. And Avram mocked them and said, Surely the savory meat that I prepared has not pleased them, or perhaps it was too little for them, and for that reason they wouldn't eat it. Therefore tomorrow I will prepare fresh, savory meat, better and more plentiful than this, in order that I may see the result. And it was on the next day that Avram directed his mother concerning the savory meat. And his mother rose and fetched 3 fine kids from his flock. She's a stud, by the way. Just something to consider this. Abram's mom right here. I've had to catch sheep recently, last week. Last week I had to catch a sheep. I totally missed. Dang it. I have to totally confess this. And I caught the fence with my shepherd's crook and it flung me around like a gypsy in the wind. Dang it. There's somebody else saw this and witnessed this and mocked me. Not too bad, just enough. You know what I mean? They dove on top of the sheep with their arms and hands and wrestled it to the ground like a champion. But it was the tallest wither of our flock. Really tall. Really, really tall sheep. And I've always been able to catch the sheep with the shepherd's crook around their neck as they're generally lunging. Right as they do this lunge, we wedge them kind of into a corner. And then you can either, if it's a tight corral, we didn't have a tight corral at the time. We had them in a pretty big pen of our orchard down here. And I tried to dive on this sheep, but I missed. Because they normally have this predictable lunge right when they go to escape that pressure as you're coming in on them like a wolf out of the corner of their eye. They will make this jump for that one opening that you're pressing them to, and you're like, got you, son. And so I did my normal lunge, but the problem is my body's so full of tension and tightness and tautness right now from the work I've been doing that I was definitely not limber. And I missed badly, just caught the fence. But we finally caught the sheep. And normally I can catch the sheep with the crook of my shepherd's crook, and then I straddle their backside. I like go on top of them around their hips, and I use my legs to pivot their hips and move them forward and walk them. And it works really well. And I've done that successfully with 3 sheep. Well, then I missed on this one. But then I got it from the other guy, and he's like, you want me to walk it out there? You want to walk it out to this tree? Because I got to slaughter it, right? And I want the blood to go in the ground by the tree. It's like, I love it when the blood can go into the earth by trees, especially trees that are going to bear forth either shade or fruit. So we figure out, okay, yeah, I'll just walk it like normal, right? So I put my shepherd's crook around it, I step on top of it, and I try to walk it out. And it's so tall. I can't, my toes are barely touching the earth. I'm like, I'm just riding the sheep. I'm just riding the sheep at this point. I totally was riding the sheep with my tippy toes, trying to walk it out the gate. And I'm like, oh my gosh, please don't run. Please don't run. I have no idea how to ride a sheep, and I'll probably lose horribly. And like, I'll get dragged through fields of nightmares and barbed wire fences. Oh, thankfully he didn't run because I had the shepherd's crook of authority on him. I walked him out there and I totally slaughtered that sheep right there. I just grabbed him, like you see in the video on Becoming an Artisanal Butcher. I flipped him onto his side and he was completely calm and relaxed when his feet went into the air. And I slit his throat when he was totally calm. And he fell asleep and then he died. And it was wonderful. And the tree got nutrients from it. And then we were able to butcher and process that sheep. And it was spectacular. But it takes some incredible wrangling skills to capture animals. So every time when you read in one of these stories and you're like, oh yeah, and they caught a kid of the goats. And you're like, oh yeah, you ever try to catch a baby goat? Freaking so tough. When I was living in North Carolina, I totally became a shepherd there. And we had baby goats everywhere. And you know what? They're spriggly and fast and they can jump like crazy. Sheep don't jump as much. Goats do. And they're stupid, frustrating. Oh, so frustrating. So every time I read a verse where somebody goes and gets a kid of the goats or gets a sheep from the flock, you guys got to have some super respect for these humans. These women or the men, whoever it was that's doing it, you guys, they're champions. They have a skill set that is so valuable. You don't even know until you do it yourself. You don't know how hard it is to catch an animal, like physically with your hands, like that thinks you're a wolf. Like goats kind of can think of you like a peer, but a sheep will always think of you pretty much as a wolf. They'll come to you at times and stuff like that when they start to really get to know you. Like my sheep now are coming at the sound of my voice. When I go, sheep, it's time to eat, oh my sheep. I sing that song to them and they literally come running. Bah, bah. Now they're a bunch of pregnant. They're pregnant and huge right now. And some of them have lambs. So there's like, ah! And the lambs do spring about and they run around like crazy. But these are amazing, incredible lessons that are hitting right here in the scriptures. And if you don't go try to catch an animal, you don't even know. You don't even know. But now I have a better understanding of it. So I'm super impressed at Abram's mom. She's a champion. And she's cooking food for idols. But it's going to be worth it. Check this out. Such as her son was fond of. And she made of them excellent savory meat. Verse 28. Such as her son was fond of. And she gave it to her son Avram. And Terach his father did not know of it. And Avram took the savory meat from his mother and brought it before his father's Elohim into the chamber. And he came near unto them that they might eat. And he placed it before them. And Avram sat before them all day, thinking perhaps they might eat. And Avram viewed them. And behold, they had neither voice nor hearing, nor did one of them stretch forth his hand to eat the meat. And in the evening of that day in the house of Avram, Avram was clothed with the Ruach of Elohim, the Spirit of the Most High. He got a new garment on him that day. This is studly. Oh, that we would be clothed with the garments of Elohim. Just saying. Linenites. Get the Spirit of Elohim upon your flesh. And he called out. And by the way, this does not depart from him. You're going to hear what comes out of Abram from the rest of this story. It's unbelievable. It is prophecy, woeful prophecy, powerful boldness and courage. Like you're going to see some conviction come out of Abram right now. Abram's about to burn the house down. You know what I mean? And everyone in the entire kingdom is going to try to watch this guy die because of what he does next. It's crazy. There's a showdown that's about to take place from this moment forward. This is like boink, the turning pinnacle point of the entire story right here. The Spirit of Elohim came upon him. Like think of Samson now when he's about to stinking kill 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey. I have a donkey too. I've seen the donkey's jawbones. Dang it, that's a really good point. I should get that donkey's jawbone. He killed 1,000 humans with the donkey's jawbone. That's amazing. Like when the Spirit of Elohim comes upon a man, gear up, son. Stinking stuff's about to go down. Oh, invigorate your soul. And he called out and said, woe unto my father, and this wicked generation whose hearts are all inclined to vanity. Their hearts are all inclined to vanity. Embrace the billow, y'all. Linen makes you look ridiculous sometimes. These natural fiber garments do not cling to you and show off your goodly bits the same way that you might be used to. Vanity is your devilish idol in so many of your lives. And I beg you, listen and hear the warnings of what happens to vanity. Vanity is what's causing Terach to do all of this. From beginning to end, you're going to hear the testimony of what Abram says, the problem that Terach has in his heart, and it's an addiction to vanity. Check this out. Woe unto my father in this wicked generation, whose hearts are all inclined to vanity, who serve these idols of wood and stone, which can neither eat, smell, nor speak, who has mouths without speech, eyes without sight, ears without hearing, and hands without feeling, and legs which cannot move. Like them are those that made them and that trust in them. And when Avram saw all these things, his anger was kindled against his father. And he hastened and took a hatchet in his hand and came under the chamber of the Elohim. And he broke all the father's Elohim. This is personal vengeance. Check this out. Let me show you a hatchet. I have a couple different versions. Okay. This beautiful thing is like a hatchet. Okay, it's not exactly a hatchet, but it's basically like a hatchet, but better for different reasons. It's a tree pruning guy. A guy survived World War II in the jungles of Borneo with this thing. Savage, awesome testimony in history. And he was a landskeeper. He managed an estate for some incredibly wealthy people back in the turn of the century, the 1900s. And this was his tool of choice for all those years. And he took it with him into the forests, the jungles of Borneo. And he endured one of the most hellacious places on the face of the earth because he had a good tool. This thing is like an axe and a machete and a knife and a sword in one. That's why I have it, obviously. White oak handle. Awesome. This is another version of a hatchet. This is technically a Grosvenor and Brooks small forest axe. This is what I think he probably used, something more like this. Or it could have been this. Boom. It could have been an axe like this, a hatchet like this. He just had to put this on his handle, right? Yeah. This is an Indian axe head I found in the Peace River, Florida. Look at that. One of my most valuable things that I've ever found. One of the greatest treasures I've ever found. Anyways, he takes personal vengeance on those stinking idols and he smashes. He takes that anger out, man. That is the freaking moment, man. That is the bee's knees of glory. When you finally get to unleash that fury and just enrage. Like I had that video of murdering idols where I asked Chelsea to take a picture of me while I was smashing open logs in that incredible rage, and I let it out for like a peep second. And just
Whoa.
It's so satisfying. And Abram's got total biblical level vengeance and fury and wrath coming out with every stroke. And I bet you he devastated that place. Devastation. This devastation that Abrams does is literally so massive and so cataclysmic and final that the king himself is going to hear about it because it's freaking weapons of mass destruction in a mighty man's hands. Let's go on. Did you see why I tell you guys to read the book of Jasher? Pump you up, right? Like lightning in my veins. And when he had done breaking the images, he placed the hatchet in the hand of the great Elohim, which was there before them. And he went out. Oh, see what he did? Planted some evidence. Classic. And Terach, his father, came home. For he had heard at the door the sound of the striking of the hatchet. Oh gosh, busted. Okay, tradecraft rule number 1. If you're gonna smash stuff with an axe, you can't do it quietly, okay? You can't do it quietly. You can pick much smaller knives. That's why I'm a big fan of tiny blades, because they're so much quieter. Just for what it's worth. Tuck that away. You might need it someday. For he had heard at the door the sound of the striking of the hatchet. So Terach came into the house to know what this was about. And Terach, having heard the noise of the hatchet in the room of images, ran to the room to the images, and he met Avram going out. Okay, now Avram has a witness. This is bad news bears. He's got a loose end. That's what that means. And Terach entered the room and found all the idols fallen down and broken. and the hatchet. Now remember, it said there were innumerable idols in this place. Like, picture a Hindu temple, you guys, with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of idols in it. He personally smashed all of them except... oh, this is so saucy. Except the hatchet was in the hand of the largest, which was not broken, and the savory meat which Avram his son had made was still before them. And when Terach saw this, his anger was greatly kindled, and he hastened and went from the room to Avram. And he found Avram his son still sitting in the house. And he said to him, "What is this work you have done to my Elohim?" Probably more like this: "What is this work you've done to my Elohim?" And Avram answered Terach his father and said, "Not so, my lord, for I brought savory meat before them. And when I came near to them with the meat, that they might eat, they all at once stretched out their hands to eat before the great one who had put forth his hand to eat. And the large one saw their works, and they did before him, and his anger was violently kindled against them. And he went and took the hatchet that was in the house, and he came to them and broke them all. And behold, the hatchet is yet in his hands, as you see." This is like when your little children tell you a story, and you know they're just stinking telling you a story. Like, I'm sure. Like when you know their child is lying to my face right now. Well, Abraham might be playing a little get back game for the fact that his dad did not raise him for the last 50 years. You know what I mean? This is Terach having to learn the exercise of patience with his child. Check this out. And Terach's anger was kindled against his son Avram when he spoke this. And Terach said to Avram his son in his anger, "What is this tale that you have told? You speak lies to me. Is there in these Elohims a spirit or a ruach or a soul or power to do as you have told me? Are they not wood and stone? And have I not myself made them? Can you speak such lies, saying that the large Elohim that was with them smote them? It is you that did place the hatchet in his hands, and then smote them, and said that he did it." And Avram answered his father, and said to him, "And how can you serve these idols, in whom there is no power to do anything? Can those idols in which you trust deliver you? Can they hear your prayers when you call upon them? Can they deliver you from the hands of your enemies? Or will they fight your battles for you against your enemies, that you should serve wood and stone, which can neither speak nor hear? And now surely is it not good for you, nor for the sons of men that are connected with you, to do these things? Are you so silly and so foolish, or so short of understanding, that you will serve wood and stone and do after this manner? And forget Yahuwah, Elohim, who made heaven and earth, and who created you in the earth, and thereby bring a great evil upon your souls in this matter, by serving stone and wood. Did not our fathers in the days of old sin in this matter? And Yahuwah Elohim of the universe brought the waters of the flood upon them, and destroyed the whole earth. And how can you continue to do this, and serve Elohim of wood and stone, who cannot hear or speak or deliver you from oppression, thereby bringing down the anger of Elohim of the universe upon you? Now therefore, my father, refrain from this, and bring not evil upon your soul and the souls of your household." And Avram hastened and sprang from before his father, and took the hatchet from his father's largest idol, which Abram broke it and ran away. And Terach, seeing all that Avram had done, hastened to go from his house, and went to the king. And he bowed before Nimrod, and stood before him. And the king said to him, "What do you want?" And he said, "I beseech you, my lord, to hear me. Now 50 years back, a child was born to me, and thus has he done to my Elohim, and thus has he spoken. And now, therefore, my lord and king, send for him, that he may come before you, and judge him according to the law, that we may be delivered from his evil." And the king sent 3 men of his servants, and they went and brought Avram before the king. So his dad just turned him into the government. Do you know what I mean? His dad turned him over to the authorities. He's like, you know what? No, I want to keep doing radical, intelligent evil. No. And instead, I'm going to try to get you in trouble in its place. Sounds familiar. Like, there's some kind of theme throughout the scriptures where cycles of reality repeat themselves. Like they're inescapable because it's the same spiritual powers that are influencing people on both sides. So you see the same physical fruit play out on both sides. That's why I tell you guys, turn down the black mirrors. Like take a break from the black mirrors and what the prophets of evil might be speaking at any given moment. And tune into what the Father's already told you has happened and is going to happen. It will give you such peace and understanding so that you're not ending up like Tarok, trying to hold on to the vanity and forsaking all of the truth for the little conveniences, the big conveniences that he has. And the king said to Avram, "What is this that you have done to your father and to his Elohim?" And Avram answered the king in the words that he spoke to his father. And he said, "The large Elohim that was with them in the house did to them as you have heard." And the king said to Avram, "Had they power to speak and eat and do as you have said?" And Avram answered the king, saying, "And if there be no power in them, why do you serve them and cause the sons of men to err through your follies? Do you imagine that they can deliver you or do anything small or great that you should serve them? And why will you not sense the Elohim of the whole universe, who created you, and in whose power it is to kill and keep alive? O foolish, simple, and ignorant king, woe unto you forever. I thought you would teach your servants the upright way, but you have not done this, but have filled the whole earth with your sins and the sins of your people who followed your ways. Do you not know, or have you not heard, that this evil which you do, our ancestors sinned in the days of old, and the eternal Elohim brought the waters of the flood upon them and destroyed them all, and also destroyed the whole earth on their account? And will you and your people rise up now and do like unto this work, in order to bring down the anger of Yahuwah Elohim of the universe, and to bring evil upon the whole earth? Now, therefore, put away this evil deed which you do, and serve the Elohim of the universe, as your soul is in his hands. And then it will be well with you. And if your wicked heart will not hearken to my words, to cause you to forsake your evil ways and to serve the eternal Elohim, then you will die in shame in the latter days, you and your people and all who are connected with you, hearing your words or walking in your evil ways. And when Avram had ceased speaking before the king and princes, Avram lifted his eyes to the heavens, and he said, Yahuwah sees all the wicked, and he will judge them. That is what happens when the spirit, the Ruach of Elohim comes upon you. Like when you set yourself apart from the lies that you've inherited from your fathers, no matter how small they might be or how large and horrible they could be. When you set yourself apart from what Jeremiah 16, Bill, if you haven't read Jeremiah 16, I highly encourage you, because this is where the hunters find their purpose. This is where Yeshua is quoting from when he talks about making people fishers of men. Like when he calls to his disciples, his talmidim, his students. He calls them out of their lifestyles, their normal worlds. When he rips them out of that, when he takes them out of Mitzrayim, the world they once known, and he takes them into the wilderness on this journey with him, he tells them he's going to make them fishers of men. Yirmiyahu, chapter 16. And the word of Yahuwah came to me, saying, do not take a wife, nor have sons or daughters in this place. For thus says Yahuwah concerning the sons and daughters who are born in this place, and concerning their mothers who bear them, and their fathers who bring them forth in this land. They shall die the deaths from diseases. They shall not be lamented nor buried, but be like dung upon the face of the earth, and be consumed by sword and by scarcity of food. And their corpses shall be meat for the birds of the Shamayim and for the beasts of the earth. For thus says Yahuwah, do not enter the house of mourning, neither go to lament or mourn for them, for I have withdrawn my peace from this people, declares Yahuwah. Even the kindness and the compassions, both great and small, shall die in this land. They shall not be buried, and no one shall lament for them, or cut themselves, or make themselves bald for them. Neither shall they break bread in mourning for them to comfort them for the dead, nor give them the cup of comfort to drink for their father or their mother. Do not enter the house of feasting to sit with them or to eat and drink, for thus says Yahuwah Sevaoth, the Elohim of Israel. See, before your eyes and in your days I'm making the voice of rejoicing and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride to cease in this place. And it shall be when you declare to this people all these words, and they say to you, why has Yahuwah pronounced this great evil against us? What is our wickedness? What is our sin that we have committed against Yahuwah our Elohim? Then you shall say to them, because your fathers have forsaken me, declares Yahuwah, and have walked after other mighty ones, Elohim Achrim, and served them, and bowed themselves to them, and have forsaken me, and did not guard my Torah, my instructions. And you have done more evil than your fathers, for each one walks according to the stubbornness of his own evil heart, without listening to me. So I shall throw you out of this land and into a land that you do not know, neither you nor your fathers, and there you shall serve other mighty ones, day and night, where I show you no favor, no grace. Therefore, see, the days are coming, declares Yahuwah, when it is no longer said, Yahuwah who lives, who brought up the children of Israel from the land of Mitzrayim, Egypt. But Yahuwah who lives, who brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north and from all the lands where he had driven them. For I shall bring them back into their land that I gave to their fathers. This is the promise that is given to us, that even as he's sitting there laying out the consequences for their sins and for their choosing willful rebellion, he's telling them the hope. He never leaves his people without hope. He always gives them pockets of resistance. Testimony. Even though you've done all this, I will still have mercy on you. When you turn back to me, I will cover you and bring you out from the lands of the north. That's like us, y'all. And bring us back to the lands of our inheritance. This is the major verse I was trying to get to y'all. See, I am sending for many fishermen, declares Yahuwah, and they shall fish them. And after them. So this is after the fishers of men have had their time. I'd say we're approaching that season where we're no longer fishing, where we're going to start hunting. And after that I shall send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them from every mountain and every hill and out of the holes of the rocks. For my eyes are on all their ways. They have not hidden from my face, nor has their wickedness been hidden from my eyes. And I first shall repay double for their wickedness and their sin, because they've defiled my land with their dead bodies of their filthiness, and have filled my inheritance with their abominations. O Yahuwah, my strength and my stronghold, my refuge in the day of distress, the Gentiles shall come to you from the ends of the earth and say, our fathers have inherited falsehood, vanity, and there is no value in them. Would a man make a mighty one for himself, which are not mighty ones? Therefore, see, I am causing them to know this time. I cause them to know my hand, my might. and they shall know that my name is Yahuwah. We are part of those generations who say, surely we have inherited vanity and lies. And no matter what the cost is, I cannot perpetuate, carry on generations of deception by teaching my children how to do the traditions of men and forsake the instructions of my father. Because I can see why Abram had so much faith for the rest of his life, because now Abram just had his opportunity. He got his audience with the king. Like, I've waited my whole life for the moment. Every man can have it. Every woman, every child can have it. You, in a moment's notice, could be brought before the king. You could be brought before politicians, presidents, pastors, priests. You could be brought before prime ministers. You could be brought before CEOs and executives and board holders. You could be brought before the ruling elite on this earth at any moment. He could raise you up and send you out to give a message, to give a word. That's the word Abram gives to Nimrod. Of anything he said, that's the thing he says. I want to be made ready so that if ever I'm given an opportunity to do that, the Spirit of Elohim would come upon me and I would speak out of my mouth his words. Not mine, but his. Because look at the effectiveness of what Abraham has just done. Because all of the rulers, all of Nimrod's counselors and princes and, the guys he spends his life with, just witness this guy, dude, human, show up and threaten him to his face, belittle his gods, belittle all the work that he's done in his kingdom, to totally mock him. He called him silly and lacking of understanding. Like, he eviscerated him verbally. Because that's the true weapon of most mass destruction, y'all. The sword that comes out of your mouth, known as the words, Gibborim. Chapter 12 of Yashar. And when the king heard the words of Avram, he ordered him to be put into prison. And Avram was 10 days in prison. And at the end of those days, the king ordered that all the kings, princes, and governors of different provinces and the sages should come before him. And they sat before him, and Avram was still in the house of confinement. And the king said to the princes and the sages, "Have you heard what Avram the son of Tarak has done to his father? Thus has he done to him, and I ordered him to be brought before me, and thus has he spoken. His heart did not misgive him, neither did he quake in my presence. Behold, now he is confined in the prison. And therefore decide what judgment is due to this man who reviled the king, who spoke and did all the things that you heard." And they all answered the king, saying, "The man who reviles the king should be hanged upon a tree. But having done all the things that he said and despised our Elohim, he must therefore be burned to death. For this is the law in this matter. If it please the king to do this, let him order his servants to kindle a fire day and night in your brick furnace, and we will cast this man into it." And the king did so. And he commanded his servants that they should prepare a fire for 3 days and 3 nights in the king's furnace that is in Kasdim. And the king ordered them to take Avram from prison and bring him out to be burned. And all the king's servants, princes, lords, governors, and judges, and all the inhabitants of the land, 900,000 men, stood opposite the furnace to see Avram. And all the women and little children crowded upon the roofs and towers to see what was going on with Avram. They all stood together at a distance. There was not a man left that did not come on that day to behold the scene. This is quite seriously like the president turning on the presidential broadcasting system that every single phone, every Black Mirror on the face of the country and or potentially the world, but the country, suddenly sees a message from them. This is what he chooses to get everybody to come and witness. Do you know what Yahuwah calls this? A setup. Nimrod thinks he's about to show every one of these people his power, his might, his strength. He's trying to establish his name as the mighty one on the earth, the mighty ruler on the earth. And Abram is going to establish the name of Yahuwah over all the earth in its place. This is the great uppercut that the big guy can never see coming, because you physically can't see it, because you're so massive. You can no longer see your toes. Like, that's where Nimrod is. He has lifted himself up to such pride and arrogance that he cannot see the very hand that is going to decimate him. But now he's going to suddenly have that realization, because there was a prophecy spoken about Abram when he was born in Terah's house. The day that Abram was born, there was a prophecy. Then they saw this star come out of the east, or the star come up out of the sky, and it consumed basically all the 4 great stars of the whole earth. And they're like, that child that was born to Abram, he's going to totally conquer the whole earth. The kingdom, the gospel of the kingdom, it starts right here, you guys. It starts in the garden, but it's reiterated right here. And it's been the perpetual gospel of the kingdom forever. The good news. All right, and when Abram was come, the conjurers of the kings and the sages saw Abram, and they cried out to the king, saying, Our sovereign Lord, surely this is the man whom we know to have been the child, at whose birth the great star swallowed the 4 stars, which we declared to the king 50 years ago. And behold, now his father has transgressed your commands and mocked you by bringing you another child, which you did kill. And when the king heard their words, he was exceedingly angry and ordered Terach to be brought before him. So just so you know, the adversary always tries to kill children from specific generations and times and set apart children. He really has a big thing for killing babies. Like, no joke. Major, major thing. Terach, in order to the first time he wanted to stay and keep all his possessions and his power and his authority, Nimrod said, bring me Abram, that baby that was born to you, you bring him to me. I'm going to kill him, and I'll give you your house completely full of silver and gold. And Abram was like, no. He told him a really good parable that was witty and smart. But then he literally said, keep the silver and the gold, because you can't buy my child. And he said, you'll bring him to me or I'm going to kill you. Okay. So 3 days later, he brings him somebody else's child. Another servant in his house gave birth to a child. He brought that baby before Nimrod. Nimrod grabbed the baby by the foot and threw it down onto the ground with all his might and killed it. He crushed the baby to death. So he thought Abram and this prophecy of this king that would rise up above him and kill him and conquer him was taken care of 50 years ago. And now he's having this, oh my gosh, moment. And the king said, verse 12, and the king said, have you heard what the conjurers have spoken? Now tell me truly, how did you? And if you speak the truth, you shall be acquitted. And seeing that the king's anger was much kindled, Terach said to the king, my lord and king, you have heard the truth, and what the sages have spoken is right. And the king said, how could you do this thing to transgress my orders, and to give me a child that you did not beget, and to take value for him? And Terach answered the king, because my tender feelings were excited for my son at the time, I took a son of my handmaid and I brought him to the king. And the king said, who advised you to do this? Tell me, do not hide it from me, and then you shall not die. And Terach was greatly afraid in the king's presence. And he said to the king, it was Haran, my eldest son, who advised me to do this. And Haran was in those days that Abram was born, 32 years old. But Haran did not tell his father to do this. For Terach said this to the king in order to deliver his soul from the king, for he feared greatly. Here's another father giving up his other son to try to save his own rear end. Fathers, rule number 1, fundamentals. You lay down your life for your children. You're not supposed to lay their life down for yours. It's the fundamental reality. Yeshua laid down his life for his father to have a relationship with all of us. He gave his life up for the ransom of many, for the redemption, so we could know him again, so we could be in a relationship with our Father, so we could establish the covenant through his flesh once more. He laid down his life as a sacrifice. This is the ultimate coward walking. The greatest cowardice of a man is to sacrifice his children for his own livelihood. It's the greatest sign of cowardice one could ever have upon them, is that you give your children over for your consequences. You let them bear your punishments, your sufferings. It's an incredible evil, and it is the ultimate sign of foolishness in a man. And the king said to Terach, Haran, your son, who advised you to do this, shall die through fire with Avram. For the sentence of death is upon him for having rebelled against the king's desire in doing this thing. And Haran at that time felt inclined to follow the ways of Avram, but he kept it within himself. And Haran said in his heart, Behold, now the king has seized Avram on account of these things which Avram did. And it shall come to pass that if Avram prevail over the king, I will follow him. But if the king prevails, I will go after this king. Now listen, this is someone who is considering following the way, but not with a whole heart. And you're going to hear me. This man will not be spared the fires of judgment, because he did not serve him with his whole heart. But you see that doubt. And you know what? That doubt only gets refined by walking in faith, by going into the fires, knowingly going into the fires. Like, as much as the cauldron's got to burn in me, I still got to burn that stuff out, because by doing so, I will get to receive shalom. I would rather burn now in this life so that I can be given rest and restoration in the one to come than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin, like it says in Hebrews 11. Moses surrendered and gave up the fleeting pleasures of sin for an eternal inheritance. And this is what Terach will not do. Haran, his son, is going to suffer death because he won't then serve wholeheartedly Avram's Elohim. But Avram is upright in heart, and you're going to see it. Behold, now the king seized Avram on account of these things. Oh, verse 20. And when Terach had spoken this to the king concerning Haran, his son, the king ordered Haran to be seized with Avram. And they brought them both, Avram and Haran, his brother, and they cast them into the fire. And all the inhabitants of the land, and the king's servants, and the princes, and all the women and the little ones were there, standing that day over them. And the king's servants took Avram and his brother, and they stripped them of all their clothes, except their lower garments, which were upon them. And they bound their hands and their feet with linen cords. Linen. And the servants of the king lifted them up, and cast them both into the furnace. And Yahuwah loved Avram, and he had compassion over him. And Yahuwah came down and delivered Avram from the fire, and he was not burned. Who do you think came down into the fire? Yahuwah, the Creator, the Father, has not been back on this earth since sin entered it. He will not be in the presence of sin. Everything will get consumed if he shows up. Who comes down? The word of Yahuwah that came down in the flesh and made his dwelling among us. This is Yeshua. He has been present from the beginning and is present to the end. From the Aleph, the beginning origin point, to the Tav, the very end and the final spoken word. He is there, working on his Father's behalf. He comes down into the fire. Do you know what other time he came down into the fire? Why Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Azariah. Azariah. There's two other, I cannot remember their Hebrew names, sorry. Those three men that went into the fire, that most of us are raised on our children's Bible study or the daily devotionals, and you read about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they get thrown into the fire, and they survive because an angel of Elohim comes down into the fire. Nebuchadnezzar himself looks into the fire, and he sees an Elohim, a son of Elohim, walking around in the flames. He's like, there's an Elohim, there's God, and God is in there. He's in there right now. He sees Yeshua in the fire with them. And here is Yeshua in the fire with Avram. And you know what? Yeshua will be in the fire with us when he burns the earth. But if you are given incorruptible immortality, when you are given an immortal body, you can stand in the fire and not be burned, which is why you get to then become someone who is able to go into the presence of Yahuwah. You can never be in the presence of your Father if you do not have a body that can survive the fire. He has to give us those incorruptible bodies for us to even ever have a potential to witness him again. This is why angels have the capacity to go into the presence of Yahuwah. Like, they're made of a material that's different than blood and bone and flesh. Like, they're made of a different thing than we are. They can go into that realm. They can shapeshift and endure fire or water. They can go through the realms differently than we can. But we cannot do that until we are given a new body. Avram is in there with Yeshua in the fire. But all the cords with which they were bound him were burned, while Avram remained and walked about in the fire. And Haran died when they'd cast him into the fire. He was burned to ashes, for his heart was not perfect with Yahuwah. And those men who cast him into the fire, the flame of the fire spread over them, and they were burned, and 12 men of them died. And Avram walked in the midst of the fire 3 days and 3 nights, and all the servants of the king saw him walking in the fire. And they came and told the king, saying, Behold, we have seen Avram walking in the midst of the fire, and even the lower garments which are upon him are not burned, but the cord with which he was bound is burned. And when the king heard their words, his heart fainted. His heart melts. That pride faded away in an instant, because that uppercut was just loosed upon his jaw. And he would not believe them. So he sent other faithful princes to see this matter. And they went and saw it, and they told it to the king. And the king rose and went to see it. And he saw Avram walking to and fro in the midst of the fire. And he saw Haran's body burned. And the king wondered greatly. And the king ordered Avram to be taken out from the fire. And his servants approached to take him out, and they could not. For the fire was round about, and a flame was ascending towards them from the furnace. And the king's servants fled from him. And the king rebuked him and said, Make haste! Bring Avram out of the fire, and you shall not die. And the servants of the king again approached to bring Avram out, and the flames came upon them and burned their faces, so 8 of them died. And when the king saw that his servants could not approach the fire, lest they should be burned, he called to Avram, O servant of the Elohim who is in heaven, go forth from amidst the fire, and come here before me. And Avram hearkened to the voice of the king, and went forth from the fire, and came and stood before the king. And when Avram came out, the king and all his servants saw Avram coming before the king with his lower garments upon him, for they were not burned, but the linen cord with which he was bound was burned. And the king said to Avram, How is it that you were not burned in the fire? And Avram said to the king, The Elohim of the heavens and the earth, in whom I trust, and who has all in his power, he delivered me from the fire into which you cast me. And Haran, the brother of Avram, was burned to ashes, and they sought for his body, and they found it consumed. And Haran was 82 years old when he died in the fire of the Kassadim. And the king and princes and the inhabitants of the land, seeing that Avram was delivered from the fire, they came and bowed down to Avram. And Avram said to them, Do not bow down to me, but bow down to the Elohim of the world who made you. Serve him. Go in his ways, for it is he who delivered me out of the fire, and it is he who created the souls and the spirits and the ruach coat of all men, and formed in his mother's womb, and brought him forth into this world, and it is he who will deliver those who trust in him from all pain. And this thing seemed very wonderful in the eyes of the king and the princes, that Avram was saved from the fire, and that Haran was burned. And the king gave Avram many presents, and he gave him his 2 head servants from the king's house. The name of one was Onye, and the name of the other was Eleazar. And the king's princes and servants gave Avram many gifts of silver, of gold, and pearls. And the king and his princes sent him away, and he went in peace. And Avram went forth from the king in peace. And many of the king's servants followed him, and about 300 men joined him. And Avram returned on that day and went to his father's house, he and the men that followed him. And Avram served Yahuwah Elohayu all the days of his life. And he walked in his ways and followed his Torah. And from that day forward, Avram inclined the hearts of the sons of men to serve Yahuwah. Avram testifies to the people that Yahuwah is the one who can deliver those who trust in him from all their pain. I have trust that my Father will, my heavenly Father, will deliver me from my pain. He will deliver you from your pain and your sufferings and your anguish. And you know what? He will reward you with riches for your faithfulness. He will reward you with an inheritance of life. Eleazar, Abram's servant, is given to him by King Nimrod. He becomes the faithful servant of Abram. And Abram becomes a whole new man on his journey. And you know what? Eleazar is the very one who will pick for Isaac the wife that becomes the mother to nations. She becomes the one who gives birth out of her loins come the nations of Israel. What an incredible honor that Eleazar's hands were given the opportunity to do it. In the next chapter, in this very chapter, Nimrod again, 2 years later, sends assassins to murder Abram. And Eleazar is the one who tells Abram about the plot and saves his life. He was a good servant to his master. This book, guys, Yashar, is amazing. It fills in so many of these stories, and it refuels my soul. And I can't thank you guys enough for coming along with me as we learn and we grow in this. Because you know what? He is going to heal all of the pains of the earth. That dead zone off the Gulf of Mexico, he's going to cleanse it. He's going to heal the earth, which groans in pain. The earth is trusting in the Maker. The earth trusts that its Maker will heal it. We can forbear, we can endure, and trust likewise that he will make it right. He will rectify it. He will vindicate us and give us an inheritance that is worth waiting for and trusting in and believing it. I love you all so much. Thank you for everything you do to encourage and support our family so that we can give forth the treasures of the earth to the people of the nations. We love you. I'll talk to you soon.